When moral philosophy passes from an oracular phase into one that, at least in theory, is exclusively humanitarian, the object and criterion of good government will be said to be the good of the people. This way of expressing it does not exclude from the functions of government all concern for country, glory, monuments, science, letters, or religion. The cultivation of these interests might well form a part of the good proper to the people, or to a part of them. Yet humanitarian morality excludes ideal aims, except as they may be psychological demands in living persons, that they may have been, occasionally, the goods chiefly prized by mankind, or may be such in the future, would not make them the good of the people now. Leaving for consideration later what the good of the people may be, I will first consider more carefully the scope of this term, the people. At first blush, it may seem obvious that the people means all the inhabitants, and that the people whose good a good government must serve comprise all the population subject to its jurisdiction. But these words are scarcely uttered when questions come trooping into the mind. Are resident foreigners or tourists momentarily in the country a part of the people that the government should serve? It certainly affects the stranger's comfort or welfare, should it provide for them gratis out of the universal goodwill, or only in view of reciprocal favors when traveling or trading abroad. May not a good government conduct its foreign policy in such a way as to support kindred nations, even at the cost of some sacrifice of material interest at home? And here, subtler questions begin to appear. Are the purposes pursued by a nation in the past to be counted among its true interests, apart from the degree of attention that the public may be giving them at the present moment? Should not a good government direct the people to recognition of their true good? Should it not, for instance, leave them free if their true good is liberty, even if they clamor for protection, prohibition, compulsory education of all grades, and guaranteed work, lodgings, pensions, and social services? Or, if the clamor is against these alleged benefits, should not a good government make itself the representative of the people's higher selves, show them what they would be missing without its guidance, and for their own good, compel them to be healthy, educated, virtuous, and happy? Whatever course the government takes, it would seem to be condemned to secure the good as recognized by only some people, and this theoretical difficulty becomes a burning political problem in fixing the limits actually set to the people at various times and places. Thus, the ancient Jews frankly called themselves the chosen people, limited in race to the children of Abraham, and in moral identity to faithful adherence to the law of Moses and the spirit of the Hebrew prophets. The same principle of selection for membership in the one rightly dominant people on earth and triumph of society in heaven appears in Islam and in the various forms of Christianity modified by historical circumstances. And it reappears now, disguised in secular terms, in the two rival ideologies, communist and liberal, ready to exterminate each other. The people, in the one case, include only the Communist Party, faithful to its providentially self-imposed leaders, and in the other, it includes all men, insofar as they agree to differ in thought, but in action always follow the majority. The people, for the communists, must be unanimous. For the liberals, All parties are admitted, except the criminals, who attempt to impose their special opinions by force or by guile. Even here, therefore, the police must impose respect for what one party esteems most, namely, for liberty. These attempts to be rational are really militant, and we must look to the generative order of society to see what the people, in fact, may signify. In tribal societies, it naturally means the tribe, and when agriculture has domesticated and rooted them, it means the local population in contrast to strangers, and the common people in contrast to their natural leaders. The classical case from which the word people is derived is that of the Senatus Populusque Romanus. Verbally, the contrast here is between patricians, the landowners, and their children and dependents, and the artisan free population of the city. But there was another class, or classes, excluded from the people politically, namely resident foreigners, chiefly merchants, and slaves who served the patrician and plebeian landlords or households. It was only the natives that formed the Senatus Populusque, and those together formed not the population, but the government. This articulation of the contrast between the government and the governed was transformed by the barbarian conquest, the feudal system, and the Christian types of peasant serfdom and domestic service. Peasants and servants then joined the artisans in the towns in composing the people, and distinct, though often derived from them, were the clergy and men at arms, commanded by a nobility composed of military chiefs turned into local proprietors and potentates. A complicated hierarchy of lieges and vassals of different ranks arose both in church and state, with popes, emperors, and kings, by divine right, occupying exalted places, often rather dignities than powers. Yet, especially in the commercial or industrial cities, vestiges of the Populusque Romanus reappeared in picturesque Christian guise. The trades became institutions with legal privileges and rights, such as the plebeians had extorted in Rome from the patricians. These townspeople could well resist the exactions of their feudal landlords. Merchants, artists, doctors, and clergy began to form a bourgeois class distinct from artisans and shopkeepers, and began to feel that they were not essentially part of the people. They became the upper middle class. Yet it has been they, backed by militant eruptions from the working class beneath and the aristocracy above, that have constituted the liberal and democratic parties of recent times, invoking and professing to serve the people without being a part of them. In modern England, social and political custom has never sharply distinguished the people from the nation or from the government, and it can hardly be said that universal suffrage, for instance, has brought the government nearer to the heart of the people than it was under Queen Elizabeth. Nevertheless, the social hierarchy has nowhere been more clearly defined or respected than in England until the 20th century. Snobbery, of which satirists accused the nation, was a peculiar sentiment of duty, deference, and sympathy in the humbler persons at each stage towards those above them, and emotionally the court and the government felt themselves to be as much a part of the people as the shopkeepers, servants, or sailors. The same continuity of political consciousness runs in the United States through all degrees of wealth and forms of labor, and the same good-natured pleasure at the greater wealth of others is seen in the common people as in England at their higher station, which is not long distinguishable from hereditary wealth. Perhaps the most genuine line of cleavage in human society in all ages and countries is that between the rich and the poor. The poor we have always with us, and in some form the rich, and the privileged also. But while wealth, at least great wealth, is not visible in a man or woman, but only in their houses and other belongings, poverty can be recognized at sight, and its distress made visible. It also has the property proper to the generative order of things, of being in flux and removable, at least in its casual forms and distribution. In the East, where extreme poverty is often patent and widespread, it seems too human and exchangeable a condition to form a particular people, especially where traditional wisdom and refinement of feeling may often be present in the poor more than in the rich. It is precisely in the East that the naturally distinctive properties of a people become obvious, crossing all boundaries of states and established jurisdictions. A people is, properly speaking, a civilized tribe, united by blood, language, and religion. In its origins, a people may be as hybrid as you please, but insofar as it is morally and politically one people, it will tend to become, by inbreeding, a pure race. If a mixed population in a given territory tends to segregate, rather than to merge, as whites and blacks seem to tend in the United States, they will become two peoples, which would not necessarily prevent them from living side by side in the same country, under the same government, if this government were not totalitarian, but respected the moral and civic individuality of each people. Contemporary support for this analysis of the political essence of a people may be found in the language of communist governments. They demand that all the political parties and influences be inspired by the people. But this people is not the whole population, nor the majority of it, nor the part that preserves and transmits ancient tradition. It means often a small minority of the inhabitants who have recently embraced, even in Russia, a foreign theory of government. Yet these few converts compose a people, and even the people, precisely because they are the proletariat, that is to say, the outcasts, without possessions or allegiance of any sort, and are therefore called to gather from all nations, like the early Christians, and form together a new universal people, unanimous in faith and obedient to a rule of life, which the whole world ought to adopt and must adopt if it is to establish peace on earth and to enjoy it forever. Government is an art, serving economic and moral interests. The limits of the people who inspire and obey it are properly vital and moral limits, not geographical or racial, except by accident. A people may migrate, and in proportion to the strength of its vital unity, it will tend to fuse its blood and its moral heritage into a single race and language. Tribal bonds are usually local. The local cohabitation may be the occasion of vital fusion among peoples originally strangers and rivals. On the other hand, a purely moral bond, like religion, may sometimes suffice to cement and distinguish a scattered people. The Jews are the primary example of a great and long-lived people, closely united, without a government or a territory. And Islam, while essentially militant and haughty, can unite many different regions and races into one people by attachment to a common way of life and sentiment. And it seems to me not impossible that in a similar way, the Catholic Church, without anywhere retaining political domination, might subsist throughout the world as a distinct people in larger or smaller groups of different races and speech, everywhere faithful the same religious customs, philosophy, and arts. Such a diversity of civilized peoples, each with its vital inspiration and traditional regimen, flourishing perhaps on the same universal basis of rational economic order, would seem to me highly desirable. Mankind walks on the material planet under one material firmament. These conditions it is to their common advantage to respect. But that toll once paid to necessity, why should not vital liberty in each heart devise the private or social or ideal order by which it would live?